The community at Florida State University is trying to grapple with the mass shooting that unfolded on campus as we learn more about the suspected gunman and his past. 2 people were killed. Neither were students, but 5 others were wounded. And this all happened just before noon near the student union, and we have video from the scene as the shooting was unfolding, but I want to warn you, it might be difficult to watch. The blurred part of the video you're going to see is a victim on the ground. You see the gunman literally turning and firing at students. One student was leaving the student union when she witnessed the gunman near his car. This is what she saw.
I look back and I see him waving around a larger gun, which I at first thought was a rifle, but I guess it was a shotgun. And he let off a shot kind of in our direction as we were walking away from the union. He turned, probably because he missed at longer distance, and turned to his car and grabbed the handgun out, the pistol, and he turned towards the union, and that's when I saw him shoot a woman in purple scrubs in the back, in her back, and I just started running. I ran a mile all the way to my apartment.
And she says she realized there was no target and that he was shooting anybody he could see. Now, students inside classrooms scrambled to evacuate. Some walked by police officers holding their weapons as they left, as you can see here on this video. And this is what students heard when they first realized something was wrong.
A dangerous or life-threatening situation exists on campus. Take shelter now in a secure location.
That's what the students did shortly after. Police eventually shot the suspect, who is still in the hospital tonight. Authorities have identified him as 20-year-old Phoenix Eichner. He's a student of the school, and police say he's the son of a sheriff's deputy who works as a local school resource officer, and he used her gun to carry out the shooting.
Unfortunately, her son had access to one of her weapons, and that was one of the weapons that was found at the scene. He has been steeped in the Leon County Sheriff's Office family, engaged in a number of training programs that we have. So it's not a surprise to us that he had access to weapons.
It was one of the weapons found at the scene. I want to begin with CNN Chief Law Enforcement Analyst John Miller. John, thanks for being here. Look, as we understand so far, the suspect isn't cooperating with law enforcement, but what else do we know about him?
Well, we know he was a student at FSU, Tallahassee, that he lives locally. He drove his orange, very conspicuous Hummer from the house to the school. We know he's a political science major. Interestingly, he was quoted in the student newspaper back in January when he encountered anti-Trump demonstrators just after the election, saying, these people are usually pretty entertaining, but not for good reasons. It's a little late. He's already going to be inaugurated on January 20th. There's nothing you can do short of revolt, which is not a good idea. So more of a sardonic quote. His social media is locked down. His Instagram is private, but under his picture there's a quote about "This is my war club." It's taken from the Bible about smiting enemies. So we don't have a clear picture of what was going on behind the scenes in his life.
But obviously all things law enforcement will be looking into as part of this investigation. And you know, John, look, at least two people killed so far that we know of, 5 injured. Do we know any more about the victims tonight?
A little, but not much. And I think the FSU community has been very protective of the victims at this stage. So the 2 people who were killed are said to be both males, not students at the college. Don't know what their role was on the grounds when this happened, but it tells us something about the shooting, which is, according to witnesses, it seemed to be completely random in terms of who he pointed at and who he fired at. That's something they'll be looking at. The doctors at the hospital told us tonight that they went through surgeries with the other gunshot victims, that they were uncomplicated surgeries, they went off successfully, that the victims were not in life-threatening positions anymore, as far as they know, and were in good spirits.
And, you know, John, look, obviously a lot happens in the initial stages of this. You have care for the victims, you have law enforcement beginning investigations as well. I mean, where does law enforcement start in determining a possible motive here, especially if the suspected gunman isn't necessarily cooperating?
Well, they'll start with his mom, who probably knows him best, and who apparently he was living with, if not right now, at least till recently. The second stage will be the search warrant, where they'll get into computers, phones, then the subpoenas that went out today, and preservation orders to Instagram and other social media, basically to say, freeze those accounts so no one can delete anything, and let's go back through them. What they're going to be looking for clues of was, is there a motive? But Omar, you know this as well as I do, because you have covered as many of these as I have, which is, when we learn what the motive is, and we often do, it's usually not something that we nod our heads and say, oh, well, that makes sense. Usually it's more about something going on in the individual's head, which we find, at the cost of these lives, very unsatisfying.
And of course, there will be questions over if there were previous signs that were missed.
And there almost always are, as you also know.
Yeah. The scope of this investigation will no doubt widen. John Miller, really appreciate it. I want to bring in another FSU senior as well who was on campus during the shooting, Reid Seybold. Because Reid, you know, as we just heard from some of the other students as well, it sounds like you were also working with fellow students in a building near the student union where the shooting happened. Can you just tell me kind of when you realized that it was actually a shooting that was happening and then what happened next?
For sure, Omar. So we were, like you said, we were working on a group project in our classroom. And then two students ran in yelling about a shooting. So we immediately did as we were taught to do in high school. We turned off the lights, locked the doors, barricaded under our desks. And, you know, for about the hour that we were barricaded, we could hear gunshots. And then three distinct times I remember someone trying to open our door. The second two times I know to be the police, but the first time everyone thought it was the shooter. Now that we know he was shot outside the student union, we know it wasn't him, but we were in there, you know, hugging those next to us in some level of comfort, whether we knew them or not. You know, I was texting those I love in you know, and similarly to what you would have seen the videos from 9/11. Hey, I love you. I may never see you again. I might be dying.
And, you know, so as we just heard from the other student too, you know, meanwhile, parents are probably seeing this on the news. They're seeing stuff come out. They're trying to reach folks like you. It sounds like you're texting them as well. Now, I can't imagine, and obviously thankful you're okay. I want to ask you about something else, because as I understand, you were in an extracurricular group with the suspected gunman a few years ago, and that he may have been kicked out of that group. Can you just give us some insight? Why exactly was he maybe kicked out here?
For sure. So, little background. This was a political talk group, you know, current events of the day. And he had continually made enough people uncomfortable where, you know, certain people had stopped coming. And that's kind of when we reached the breaking point with Phoenix, and we had asked him to leave. And
what exactly, if you can remember, what exactly was he saying that made people uncomfortable, as you say?
You know, it's been a couple years now. I
Sure.
can't give exact quotes, but you know, whether it was in that club or in class, he you know, talked about the ravages of multiculturalism and communism and how it's ruining America.
And, you know, I should mention, we have not been able to independently confirm the claims about the beliefs he espoused, but, you know, that's why we're talking to some folks like you who, you know, may have known him longer than we have, certainly. Another student who's in the group, I should mention too, said the suspect wasn't radical, but tended to make more conservative positions and views, adding, quote, he was pretty normal, he was pretty nice. How do you respond to that? Could that fit into sort of your experience with him as well?
So it honestly sounds like the student is describing me normal and conservative, but I wholeheartedly disagree. You know, he wasn't. You know, he went beyond conservatism. So I disagree.
All right. And obviously, law enforcement's still looking into very specific motives on this. It's just the beginning of an investigation. But Reid,
sure.
I really appreciate you sharing your experience and perspective on this. Thanks for being here. I know it's been a long day.
Thank you, Omar.
Of course.